Okay, so far we have studied 9 different characteristics that distinguish the soul from the spirit, and we have studied or reached 3 basic conclusions regarding the soul versus the spirit. We were planning on sharing a few more things and then finishing this study, but the Lord has impressed it upon our hearts that we need to study 1 Kings chapter 13 in the context of this study that contrasts the soul against the spirit. And this will make the study much longer than we had originally intended, but that is the purpose that God has placed in our hearts, so we will do it as the Lord leads. We'll go then to 1 Kings chapter 13, and we'll try to as quickly as possible go through the elements in this chapter, and we will see how the interaction of the soul and the spirit plays out in this chapter. So let's start reading here. It's 1 Kings 13. It says, "And behold, a man of God came out of Judah by the word of the Lord to Bethel. Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make offerings. And the man cried against the altar by the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus says the Lord, behold, a son shall be born to the house of David, Josiah by name, and he shall sacrifice on you the priests of the high places who make offerings on you, and human bones shall be burned on you. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign that the Lord has spoken. Behold, the altar shall be torn down, and the ashes that are on it shall be poured out. And when the king heard the sayings of the man of God, which he cried against the altar at Bethel, Jeroboam stretched out his hand from the altar, saying, Seize him. And his hand which he stretched out against him dried up, so that he could not draw it back to himself. The altar also was torn down, and the ashes poured out from the altar, according to the sign that the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. And the king said to the man of God, Entreat now the favor of the Lord your God, and pray for me that my hand may be restored to me. And the man of God entreated the Lord, and the king's hand was restored to him, and became as it was before. And the king said to the man of God, Come home with me, and refresh yourself, and I will give you a reward. And the man of God said to the king, If you give me half your house, I will not go in with you, and I will not eat bread or drink water in this place. For so was it commanded me by the word of the Lord, saying, You shall neither eat bread, nor drink water, nor return by the way that you came. So he went another way, and did return by the way that he came, and did not return by the way that he came to Bethel." This is the first part of chapter 13, and as you can see, it talks about a man of God who went up from Judah to the kingdom of Israel. At that time, Israel had been divided into 2 kingdoms: the southern kingdom, which was known as Judah, which in kind of modern terms we could compare to what's happening to Korea. South Korea, you could say, was the kingdom of Judah, and North Korea was the kingdom of Israel. And this split had come over the kingdom of Israel because of Solomon's faithlessness, when he started giving his heart to other gods, despite all that God had done for him and given to him. So God raised up this man called Jeroboam, and he made him rebel against King Solomon. And that's a principle that many pastors don't like to talk about, many church authorities. But Jeroboam was a man raised by God to start a rebellion against the established authority in Jerusalem. It was God who put that desire for rebellion within him as a judgment against that human authority. And as a result, Jeroboam was able to take 10 tribes and form the northern kingdom, which took the name of Israel, and the other 2 tribes that remained stayed with the house of David, you could say. And they became the kingdom of Judah. So out of this kingdom comes this man of God to the northern kingdom of Israel to pronounce a word of judgment against Jeroboam. Jeroboam had been raised by God to become the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, but in the midst of that he forgot his calling, and he too fell. So judgment came upon him and his household as well. So one thing to notice as you read this whole passage and as you read through the whole chapter of chapter 13, you will notice that the name of this man of God is never mentioned at all, which is interesting. They mentioned the name of Jeroboam, which was an evil man, yet the man of God who was speaking on behalf of God doesn't have his personal name mentioned. There's a spiritual message behind that. As we've said in other parts of this study, the things of the spirit are unfamiliar to the soul. The soul thinks one way and the spirit thinks a different way. So when the spirit speaks, it says things that the soul is not used to, is not familiar with, and generally the soul doesn't quite understand what the spirit is saying to it. So there's a conflict of familiarity between the spirit and the soul. When the spirit says something, the soul goes, well, what is that? It's kind of an unknown language when the spirit starts talking at a higher level, at the purely spiritual level. And that's the reason why this man of God doesn't have his name mentioned. It's a figure of how the spirit acts in an anonymous and unfamiliar way to the soul. So that's the reason why that's one of the reasons why the name of this man is not mentioned in this passage at all, because the soul is focused on relationship. If you want to have friendship with a person, one of the first things you try to get from that person is that person's name, because that begins to establish a relationship, a communion between you and the other person. The soul, as we've said before, is focused on establishing relationships. It's more emotional. It's based on having soul communion with other souls. That's what the soul is endeavoring to do. So wherever you see a very social spirit, a spirit that focuses, an attitude that focuses on social networking and social relationships, that is an environment dominated, you could say, by the soul. Generally, and there are a lot of corruption points that can filter in to that environment when it's soul dominated. So the reason why the Spirit of God decided not to put the name of this man here is because this man, when he arrived in Israel to confront Jeroboam, was not there to have relationship with anyone. He didn't go, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm the prophet from Judah, from this town, and my father-in-law or my father is so-and-so." He didn't try to establish any connections, any type of relationship with anybody in Israel. He went, he said what he had to say, he finished what he had to say, and then he was supposed to go back home. That was it. He wasn't there to have relationships with anyone. The spirit can at times seem dry, or it can seem heartless, cold to the soul, because the spirit is focused on hardcore truths, on basic principles, fundamental principles that the soul is probably not so concerned about. The soul is more interested sometimes in small talk, and the spirit is more focused on big issues, important, relevant issues. And that's one of the reasons why the Lord decided not to mention this man's name, because he was not there on a soul assignment. He was there on a spirit assignment.